Welcome to Fora Presents, Fora's series of exclusive monthly events for fresh initiatives and big ideas. These events bring together some of the best minds, household names and industry experts to share their knowledge and insights. And this evening, our discussion will delve into the world of AI, focusing on unleashing business growth through the transformative power of AI. I'm Joycelyn Longdon. Just to introduce myself, I'm an environmental justice technologist, writer and educator. Through my PhD research at Cambridge, I work to build justice-led approaches for AI for environmental protection, with a focus on bioacoustics, which you can kind of think of as Shazam for nature. And I spend the rest of my time crafting compelling and accessible stories around climate justice, nature, technology, and environmental justice on my platform Climate in Colour. So I'll be your host tonight, and I'm joined by three experts in the AI field, all working to harness the transformative power of AI. First, Ayres is a leading expert in digital transformation and artificial intelligence, currently Master Strategist for UK and Ireland at Hewlett-Packard Enterprises, advising on transformation, big data, and AI. As discussion leader at HPE's Customer Innovation Centre, and a member of the Association of the Advancement for Artificial Intelligence, Andrew is at the forefront of AI research and application, and he's passionate about the synergy between humans and machines in the workplace and championing AI's role in organisational success. Then we have Katja, who's since senior principal researcher in the machine learning intelligence theme at Microsoft Research Cambridge, where she leads a pioneering team focused on deep reinforcement learning for games. Her mission is to push boundaries of reinforcement learning, leveraging video games as a transformative tool to enhance AI technology and human-AI interaction. One of her notable projects is Project Malmo, which utilises Minecraft to experiment and develop intelligent systems. And last but not least, we have Rutger. He's the head of product at SaaS at cm.com, a leader in cloud software that enables businesses to deliver a superior customer experience. Most recently, he's been working on the development of cm.com's Gen AI engine, a groundbreaking innovation within the platform that has significantly improved customer service. So with those introductions done, let's jump into the conversation, and I'm going to start with you, Andrew. It'd be great to hear some of the pivotal moments in your career that have led you to specialise in digital transformation and AI, and how these experiences have kind of shaped your current work at HPE.
Yeah, it's a good one. I think when I was reflecting on this, 3 moments spring to mind. The first one, probably in the early noughties, when I got my first real job. I worked at a website design agency, and they were building graphic user interfaces on the web, but then they started to become more intelligent. They would link to pick, pack and dispatch logic behind the scenes, and it kind of really opened my eyes to the fact that through this portal there was a whole supply chain and a whole range of activities that would happen behind the scenes that would lead to an order being shipped, a citizen being assisted, or whatever it might have been. And it kind of, for me, it felt like I could see a constellation of digital impact, and it was really exciting. Scanned 10 years ahead of that, I was leading the consulting organisation for Gartner in the Middle East, where I worked with Qatari and Emirati government organisations, airlines, TV stations, gas companies, whatever it might have been. And at that stage, technology was just interwoven into all of the activities, from IoT on oil and gas pipelines to digital health records, the whole lot. And I was just fascinated by it. I did an MBA at the same time that I was working there, and I did a module on economics, managerial economics. And this is where the bridge to AI came in, because I learnt about something called principal agent theory, how the bosses of firms control the agents that work within those companies. And on a bike ride, on a lonely, lonely bike ride one day, having watched Moneyball and read all about the great financial crash, I started to think and cogitate on the idea of investment bankers training machine agents with AI technology, and the risk that the machines could become an extension of that particular character type with a high appetite for risk, with certain types of morality and ethical approaches to work, you could argue. And that was the point at which I decided I would look into that in my PhD study. So I think those are the three pivotal moments: the introduction to digital transformation in its very kind of almost embryonic years, if you like, then seeing it play out across industries, and then that epiphany that I had about there's a governance problem here. Mm-hmm. If we let certain people train these machines without the right controls around them, we might see the wrong characteristics being baked into those machines. Mm-hmm. And in my work at Hewlett-Packard, I am now helping clients to understand that while there's a great amount of opportunity, there is also some risks that they need to be aware of if they're going to solve for this and if they're going to succeed.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, it's really interesting to kind of see those marker points, and we're going to come back to ethics at the end as a group question, so keep your thoughts on that. So just the second question to come to you. With your experience on advising on AI and big data, what do you think are the steps for businesses, the key steps for businesses to kind of integrate AI into their operations in a effective way?
Yeah. Now, Hewlett-Packard have some amazing technology in this area. They would probably not be delighted with what I'm about to say here, but I'm just going to say it anyway. Technology is one thing, right? And we've got some amazing things that we've developed with NVIDIA and all that type of stuff. The technology is potent, powerful, it's there. My advice to clients, however, is for them to take stock, for them to think about the use cases first, think about their strategic imperatives in the same way that they've always done with digital transformation. Look for areas of weakness, pinch points, problem zones, and think about the ways that this powerful and potent technology could be pointed at real business challenges. The reason why I'm cautious about barreling forward and just implementing these tools straight away is that you could find that you're accelerating in the wrong areas. Mm-hmm. You're building momentum without proving that that's where you need it. And I think that there's a runaway train scenario there. So despite the fact that we're a technology company trying to push technology, my advice is take stock, think about it, think about the role that you want to play if you're a citizen-centric organization. Think about your strategic imperatives, your customer priorities. Focus on those first, narrow it down to a set of use cases, and then work out how can this technology fit here. Test, fail fast, fail forward, and learn from it.
Thank you. That's really great. And actually, I just want to jump to Katja here, because you're working in a very specific space, in the game space, and it'd be interesting to kind of bounce off of what Andrew has said and explain to the room how AI is playing a role with games and technology and human interaction, and what that work looks like for you specifically.
Yeah, fantastic question. I was listening to you quite fascinated, because even though I'm in a very different area, still very much in the AI space, and a lot of the themes resonate in many ways. So I hope we get to discuss a little bit more there. But in terms of an introduction, I work at Microsoft Research. I lead a team. We call ourselves the Game Intelligence team. And I've had the pleasure and fortune to be able to build that team up from scratch over the last 10 years or so. And of course, as you may realize, in 10 years of AI research, a lot of things have changed. So it's been quite a fascinating journey to be at the very forefront of some of that transformation. In terms of what I do in my day job, my team is a little bit removed from actually putting things into practice, but rather we focus on research in the sense of understanding what's currently possible and what's missing. So in a sense, we drive some of those capabilities. Our kind of mission, if you will, or our remit is to make possible what's just on the boundary right now. And for that, video games are actually fantastic. We kind of envision that the technological advances that we drive will ultimately benefit human-AI collaboration. And video games are a fantastic space to study that because, of course, they're environments expertly crafted by sometimes enormous teams, a lot of technologists and creators, designers who make these experiences happen. They provide challenging environments for people, from puzzles to tight coordination or collaboration challenges. And so within those microcosms, if you will, we can assess data or collect data that is very rich, that would be very, very challenging to collect in other, let's say, 3D environments that we might want to study. And so our team is really leveraging those opportunities. For example, we're currently working with Microsoft Game Studios a Microsoft Game Studio that has been able to give us access to a large amount of human gameplay data, and we can push and understand if you were able to train on those kinds of data, on that amount of data, what does that mean? What can current AI models learn from that? And how do we shape the next wave of that technology? And that comes back to some of the questions also that you raised. For us, AI technology is not a given in terms of this is what it is and here are the capabilities, but we asked ourselves if we wanted to unlock certain applications, for example, to enable game designers to collaborate with this type of technology in the future, what kinds of capabilities would we need to innovate in order to make this genuinely useful for people? And so this is a context in which we operate. And now to your question on Project Malmo, it was actually one of the first projects that we pulled together within our group. And that was to look at Minecraft with all its open-endedness, with all the diverse experiences that it provides to their players, and open that up as an AI experimentation platform. And since we released this in 2016, hundreds of research teams have been building on top of that. And we've seen some really fascinating insights. There's still tons of challenges, many, many things that are open there. But it's really gratifying to see people leverage this to drive what's possible with AI.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for the context as well. A follow-up question for you is, doing this work, being in the space for 10 years, having seen so many kind of shifts within the space, how do you envision technologies developed through your research in games being applied to solve real-world challenges? So you mentioned that currently you're just experimenting at the edge of what can be possible, but I don't know if you were to come back in 10 years or 20 years and tell us what you were working on, how do you think this could kind of start working in the real world?
Fantastic. So the ultimate goal, as I mentioned, is to create ever more, let's say, fluid collaboration between human and AI. Currently, when people think about generative AI, many people think about language models. This is where we've seen the most recent jump in capability. But we're trying to look beyond that. There's a lot of work starting to look at multimodal models, and we're asking questions such as, what would an AI system need in order to understand more fully the context in which, let's say, a human makes decisions or in which they collaborate? What would it take for think of a scenario in a video game. What would it take to have an AI character that genuinely understands what you're trying to do, that could say, watch out behind you when there's a monster appearing? What would it mean for them to really help you in achieving your task? And then what are implications for that for other real-world environments? Maybe in terms of interacting with something on our phone, in augmented reality, and maybe even other types of form factors that we're not even focusing on now. So the kinds of insights that we produce are general, along the lines of, if you want to unlock this type of capability, this is the kind of data, the quality, the size of data, here are the kinds of approaches that you might need. There will still be then steps that are needed in order to actually take that to a product, but we hope to inform a wide range of those types of applications and make those possible.
Great, thank you. And just a fun question to end, what are you most excited about right now in the work that you're seeing?
In the work that I'm seeing day to day, one aspect is those multimodal models. I'm just super curious what's possible there. We've seen glimpses of that in our work of, you train a generative AI model on just gameplay data, just on what a player would see on the screen and the actions they take in that environment. And as you train on more data and compute, you see an emergent kind of detailed model and understanding of everything within that environment, how it works, its physics. So it's really fascinating to see just how detailed that structural understanding is based on a relatively unstructured type of data. So I'm very curious to see where that goes. The other direction we're pushing, we're looking at specific use cases of, for example, working with an individual game designer to understand what are the kinds of things they would need. And we're seeing a lot of gaps in current AI technology. There's so many people who have just pushed, okay, can we purely get the scale larger and larger? And of course, scale is one thing, but there's really that deep thinking that is needed about what are those capabilities, how do they fit in? And I'm really excited to have those conversations and see that they're starting to happen around what do we really need to build, where do we need to push in order to make this technology genuinely useful to as many people as possible.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, it's really interesting. Rutger, your work is in the real world, you're communicating and working with people every day. What are the biggest challenges that you've faced in integrating AI into SAS platforms?
Yeah, sure. So we're a bit more on the applied side of AI, if you will. So we make software for customer engagement, for service and marketing alike. I think the biggest challenge that we faced was that customers were super comfortable with human-in-the-loop processes. So think about like a real-time agent assistant in contact center software. But anything that was directly consumer or customer-facing was really scary for users, because there's some probabilistic element to this technology, right? You don't know exactly what it's going to say or what it's going to produce, and people find that scary towards customers. So I think sort of the non-functionals and the governance tools, being able to give feedback to the model, feeling comfort that you guard against hallucinations, prompt injections, which are like techniques to make a model say something or do something that's not supposed to, like swearing or promoting your competitor or that type of stuff. There are beautiful examples out there. I think sort of offering our customers comfort in that respect was most of the work. And there, I think you see the difference between a tool that makes for a good and a cool demo and an actual usable product that you can apply at scale towards your customers without being worried about it. And I think sort of that process of making that, sort of envisioning what it's supposed to be, like quality assurance tools and audit logging and those types of applications for machine-generated answers, if you will. That was the most challenging part, and getting our users to adopt that was, aside from the technical part, also a challenge, I'd say.
Thank you. And looking ahead into the future, what are the kind of innovations that you think are going to be really helpful in the customer service, business communication space, and are there things that you're seeing right now that could be really useful in the future?
Yeah, sure. So I'm generally most excited just about model improvement and the new capabilities that will come along. I think we've now stepped into this phase where we're no longer talking about conversational AI, but over the course of the next couple of weeks and months and years, you're going to hear a lot of buzz about agentic AI or agents. So this phase in which they actually execute actions, perform long-term horizon tasks. So you give it something to do, it goes underwater for a couple of minutes and then comes back to report that that's actually done. I think sort of that phase will take a couple of years, and something I'm particularly excited about. It's like what robotic process automation was supposed to be, I guess, but didn't really work out. And that's something, yeah, we're super interested in. And also the sort of process mining capabilities of these models. So uncovering sort of the raw data in your company or in your organization and trying to figure out, okay, what are the best processes to perform, rather than just taking the instruction from the user and trying to automate that, really thinking along in that way. And I think, you know, that's going to bring the same adoption challenges and governance tools challenges for people to actually start applying it. You need a whole bunch of integrations with countless systems that you have in sort of your software landscape, your ecosystem, if you will. Yeah, you want fallback mechanisms. People are going to go through the same phases of finding it scary and whatnot. But that, in the short term, is what we're most excited about. In the long term, we are looking at entire paradigm shifts of software. If you think about what most software tools are, is they're databases. And then at some point, we decided to paste interfaces on top of them because business users do not know how to do SQL. So you get these fancy pretty buttons that you can click, and then something happens inside of the database. A record gets created, retrieved, or updated, or deleted. But that's basically what it does. I think as these models become proficient at interacting with these data sets and data structures become more flexible, you get a whole new host of applications that are, for example, primarily conversational, that you can just give an instruction to some mundane software tool over WhatsApp. My favorite example is like asking a day off. I don't want to log in to your HRM enterprise tool with triple factor authentication, pick from 8 types of leaves, and then finally, after I figured it all out, get my day off. I just want to text something saying, can I get Jan 16th off? And it'll be done for, and that's something we're looking forward to as well.
That's a really good example to kind of contextualize what you're talking
Yeah.
about, so thank you for that. I want to come back to something you mentioned at the beginning. We've spoken a lot about kind of capabilities, things that we're excited about in the future, but you made a great point that, you know, and Katja, you touched on this as well, that it's not AI is not something that we just want to roll out, or that is just a sort of solve all, or that companies should just implement with, you know, wantonly without a clear goal or idea of why they're implementing it. And you've also mentioned about this kind of scariness, or this this kind of adoption tension that comes with AI. And I think there are some very real risks and some very real considerations from a governance perspective, from an ethics perspective. In my work, I focus on the way in which we interact with algorithms and the decisions that algorithms make and how that influences decision making, and understanding that people who are in decision making spheres have different biases or different axes of power that mean that the decisions that are made from AI algorithms really impact the way that different people experience the world and experience technology. So I think it'd be great for all three of you just to touch on either generally or within your own work as well, how you were identifying, working with and attending to some of these risks. And I think it's really important for us to share these experiences that we're having and to learn from each other about how we're approaching them. So I'll start with you, Andrew.
Yeah, it's the Rutger just mentioned there an inflection point to kind of the AI agent. When that happens, it is a paradigm shift. For me, it's the beginning of what I'd call kind of socio-materialism. So our companies, the firms that we work for, are made up of carbon and silicon, if you like, at the same time. And we extend our carbon into the silicon. It needs to do what we want it to do. It needs to be imbued with good ethics, not necessarily my ethics, but the shared collective ethics of the organisation. So it needs to almost understand what the identity of that organisation is, what its mission is, so that it doesn't deviate from the path. And we're at one end of the spectrum now, where we've got narrow or very weak AI. It's rules-based. You can go in and interrogate, that's where it went wrong. But what's going to happen in the next few years, and it's already starting to happen now, is that there's an impenetrable logic after the machines are brought to life, if you like. What happens within them can sometimes be a bit of a black box for the quant developers who put them into work, certainly a black box for people like investment bankers who don't necessarily understand how programmatic code works and numerical languages and all that type of stuff. So what we're going to see as the machines become more intelligent, they move out of our temporal understanding. So how the hell are we going to manage and govern them? And that's why the thought around ethics, morality, who we are, the idea that the machines are an extension of us, will keep us on the, as close to the straight and narrow as we can possibly get.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. It's really interesting, and I think that's something that maybe people more widely don't know, right? We're kind of always working behind what's currently popular.
And the regulators are behind.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they don't have the funding to keep pace with big tech.
Yeah.
And the legislatures are behind. I've read I've read the full EU AI Act, and it says that all companies must make known the code that sits in the... And it's like, this isn't... Okay, so we provide the code to you, but you can't understand it. So we've met our obligations, and so self-governance too, ahead of the top-down governance is key. We know when a bank fails, it can send a bullwhip effect throughout the entire economy. It affects people buying clothes on Oxford Street. It affects everything. So we've got to be very, very, very careful around that and put really tight guardrails around it.
Yeah, thank you for that. Katja, what about you?
Very interesting. So I'm probably the most on the side of I understand what's going on inside the machine to the degree of I know the algorithms, I know the training, I know the limitations. So I know what kind of data, if this kind of data goes in, this is the best I can hope for in terms of what might come out of the models. So I'm very aware of the limitations, very aware of the choices of if you train on this kind of data, you're not going to get anything that is better than whatever structure you have in the data. So you always reflect that particular point in time, that particular data set, all the biases, all the limitations within that. And so, as mentioned, we're in my team quite removed from the actual applications. It's mostly hearsay of what people do with these, and we throw our hands in the air and we say, oh, but you have to think, you have to evaluate, you have to test. And there is a big, I think, education gap still. You might be very familiar with some of the challenges there, right? How do you bridge that gap? How do you get more of that quite intuitive understanding that also experts have of, well, I know a problem in many cases when there is a data problem, but how do you diagnose that? How do you communicate with the broader and broader set of people applying these or using these algorithms, these technologies? People tend to anthropomorphize a lot of those. It takes a lot of kind of setting expectations, creating understanding to push through that, because we jump to the kinds of explanations that might make sense to us. So I think on that education side, there's a lot to be done. There's a lot of opportunity there, but also the development is so fast. There's a lot of hype, both positive and negative. So how do you cut through that and actually convey some understanding of what the current possibilities are and where the limitations lie? And then by the time you've had through and you've educated, everything might have changed again. So quite a big challenge.
I think pace is really one of the key challenges because, you know, people are developing things quickly and then the news goes out even quicker, and often the media reports on things in ways that are not accurate to what the developers are doing, and then the public get hold of information that is either overly optimistic or overly scaremongering, and then your job as an educator is to always find that balance. And actually I think a big thing is getting people to be really comfortable not working in binaries. I know we're talking about AI, we're talking about technology, but actually there isn't a binary, there isn't all bad and all good, and I think it's being comfortable with being flexible in our ways of educating and in our ways of engaging with people that's really important.
Actually, your comments reminded me of something that I've heard from a few teachers and professors that are saying, oh, at our school, at our university, the use of GPT is banned. People are not allowed to use this for whatever they're writing, for their homework, etc. And I'm also, every time I hear it, I feel like it's also a missed opportunity. There's this gut reaction to, oh, people could cheat. And as a result of that, maybe there's an opportunity of, a missed opportunity of very early on getting people an understanding. Nothing beats actually interacting with these things and getting a feeling for it. This is where it goes, where it does well. Developing some critical thinking of, well, what kinds of questions could you ask? How do you reflect? How do you evaluate the answers? We have that opportunity right now. It's much easier to make that kind of education more broadly accessible, but I think we're not quite doing enough in that space yet.
Yeah, thank you. Rutger, what about you?
Yeah, I think there are many risks that are interesting, but I'll try and stay on the sort of practical side, the applied side for businesses. I think the one I primarily see is that with the pace that this technology is developing in the coming years, the incumbents are at a disadvantage. So if you think about the entire economy now, and we've got like small businesses, mid-market businesses, big enterprises, it's the big ones and the mid-sized ones that have the most risk, if you will, of getting disrupted by the newcomers. Because whilst you're discussing in like meeting rooms for endless periods on and on, like should we use this, should we not use it, how do we apply it, is it safe, all that type of stuff, there's a startup around the corner that thinks, okay, let's ball, let's go. And it's been like that, I think, with multiple revolutions, but I think it would be nice if we can equip the incumbents with the skill set and the technology to actually implement it at a pace that the startups do as well, so that we don't necessarily have to rearrange the entire Fortune 500 and everything below it and sort of completely reorganize the economy. I think it would be a softer landing if we make sure that all of these companies adopt it at the pace that is warranted by the speed of development. So it's, I think, my primary concern.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So we kind of just touched on it a little bit, but I'd also be interested to know how you are communicating the uses of AI, the technologies that are being developed, either with your customers or with a wider audience. How are you actually getting across the things that you are doing in a way that brings people on and that makes the processes to be more easily adopted and more effective within the kind of spaces that you're working in?
I guess for me, it's, you know, we've built up, as I said at the start, a lot of capability around the technology aspects, but I think where and to Rutger's point about the incumbents, where the vast majority of my clients are those big organisations that have been around for many, many decades, sometimes much longer than that. And they have data issues. Their data is disaggregated. It takes up multifarious forms, video, structured, unstructured, the lot, okay? And they don't know where it is, what it means. And yet there are kind of splinter cells in those organizations building AI models and stuff. And you think, I get that. You've got to kind of push the envelope. You've got to be a little bit more startup in what you do in certain parts of the organization. But by and large, what I'm telling them to do is find out what data you have, bring it to the surface, you know, rationalize it, work out what can go, kill it. Work out what you can archive it, and the rest, the corpus that you're left with, they are the crown jewels there. This is the stuff you can monetize, and if you're not profit seeking, you can deliver citizen value with it or patient value with it, whatever it might be. And then the technology, like I say, is waiting there to model and draw inferences and all that type of stuff. And it's far more exciting when you've got good data that's been well considered, and then you set the technology to work on that. That's when the chief exec or whatever will be happy, because it's the meeting of people, technology and tools to deliver value in whatever way that you want to experience value.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really interesting. You know, the pace of technology is so quick, but I think if you are not working with AI a lot, you think that it's all about the model. And yeah, one thing that we speak about all the time is that it's 90% boring, patient, tedious data work. And I think, yeah, bringing people up to speed on that and showing the value that comes out at the other end is really important.
There's a hare and the tortoise thing, isn't there?
Yeah.
So you can set off really quick, or you can do it in a very methodical way and cross the finish line.
Yeah.
And I think it doesn't mean that the finish line for one company is a year away and for the other company it's 18 years away. It just might mean a slight difference. But if you've got quality data and quality tools, you will then eke out your advantage after that.
Yeah, thank you. What about you, Katja?
Very interesting. My usual audiences are one, academics. So usually I would be speaking at academic conferences, PhD students, master students getting into the field. And then there's typically the balance of motivation, so creating excitement for what might be possible. There's some of the brightest minds out there eager to find something to sink their teeth in, and they're going to be developing that next wave of technology. And then also giving them some sense of both what's cool about the technology, but also what's worth moving towards. So why is it interesting to invest in this space? What is becoming possible if we keep pushing in that direction? And current kids, students, they're actually fantastic. They're really eager to figure out the meaning, the human value, and what they might be able to contribute. So having a lot of really, really fun conversations there at conferences. The other area is strategic advising. So, for example, company internally trying to give people an understanding of what's coming, what we might want to anticipate in terms of here's where the development is today. What is this going to look like 1, 5, 10 years in the future? How do we steer in that direction? Some of the questions that come up, for example, are there will be many industries that will be disrupted. Workforces may need to learn new skills. What are those kinds of areas? What do we need to pay attention to? So those are the kinds of things that I usually think about.
Great, thank you. And Rutger, to end.
Yeah, maybe to further Katja's point, it's perhaps a bit naive, but both for all colleagues and customers, I do try and explain some of the technicalities behind the technology, because it's very hard to convince people saying, okay, here's where the technology is going to be in a year, or in 2 years, or in 3 years, if they don't genuinely understand the underlying drivers. They just have to take your word for it. And I don't think that resonates with people. So I try and invest some time into explaining like the scaling laws, like, okay, why does it work that way, that when you increase the compute and you increase the data at training time, that the models get better? Why can we do the exact same trick with test time compute? How does those scaling laws work together to sort of accelerate progress and make the models even smarter and smarter and smarter? And why are you basically guaranteed that progress in its current pace will not only continue to persist, but probably accelerate? And I think that when that sort of lands with people, it's no longer about, do I trust what you're saying? Are you just making a silly prediction? They actually, irrespective of technical background, so far, to me, seem to be very capable of absorbing why it will move the way it moves. And I think the two major trends are level of intelligence going up, cost of intelligence going down. So every new model iteration, the model will get smarter and the amount that you consume will get cheaper. So that means that you can move ahead of the curve. You can deploy workflows that may not be profitable today. Doesn't matter. If you just wait for 6 months, the models will get cheaper and then it will be fine. Or a workflow, for example, that requires certain capabilities or intelligence levels in the models that aren't there just yet, also doesn't matter. Just work on it now. When the time comes in 6 months, you'll be ready and you'll be able to profit from those capabilities from the get-go, whereas other people who are more conservative and take more of a waiting approach will not. So I think sort of explaining those two curves, explaining why progress will continue to persist and probably also accelerate, works for colleagues and customers and other stakeholders alike, and people are very capable of understanding what seems to be like abracadabra magic.
Thank you. That's a great note to end on. And now we've got time maybe for a couple of questions from the audience. So there'll be some microphones coming around for you. Yep, we'll start with you.
Yeah, thank you very much for. Thank you very much for your input. I come from the pharmaceutical industry, and I'm not an IT person at all, but I work in regulation, and so I think it was touched upon a little bit in terms of governance, in terms of regulations. I mean, the pharma space, we talk about regulators being behind the curve of innovation. I can imagine in your sector, it's even, you touched upon it. How is the kind of regulation piece impacting not only your work within your companies or enterprise or organizations, but also how you're seeing that regulatory/innovation interface impacting the work that you're doing, and also how your clients, users, whatever, will kind of ultimately benefit or not from the technology and the regulation. Essentially, something about the regulation and how we're dealing with it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
I think it's making everybody's head spin, because if you think about a a bank and a financial transaction or a big global organization, often some of those transactions and workflows transcend national borders, where different regulatory regimes have an impact, right? So I think that at the minute what you have at the technocratic level in these organizations is a sense that the regulation's not really settled yet, so we're still able to plough our furrow here. For instance, the banking industry doesn't have a supranational set of, so like Bank of America, for instance, operating in London, what set of regulation is that adhering to? The US, which is rules-based, here it's principles-based, so try your best not to, whereas in the US it's we will sue you if, and in the EU it's different again. So it's kind of, I think there's a lot of uncertainty at the minute, and that really needs to settle down in finance, in pharma, in health, everywhere, before we can really decide as organisations how we're going to attack this in the right way, how we're going to safeguard ourselves and the people we serve and the customers we serve and all that type of stuff.
Did anyone else have a response?
Yeah, maybe briefly. It's not an area where I'm particularly an expert in, so all I can talk about is my own experience from the research perspective. At Microsoft, they've actually very quickly put guardrails in place. So we recently worked with an internal review board because we're preparing for releasing one of the models that we trained for our research to the wider academic community so that they can build on top of our work. And now any kind of model release has some risks with it. And so I was actually really impressed how quickly that new kind of organization has been built up and is really working hard to try and ask the right questions. What are the risks? What are the benefits? How can we evaluate and make statements about this model when it's still something that's very much in development? So I know it's a very difficult area, but at least I'm seeing efforts that are trying to do the right thing, and that gave me quite a bit of confidence that there's something working there.
And I'll just add that I think that the more that people who are technical are also working on ethical challenges, I think some of that gap in how quickly regulation moves is that people are making regulations who maybe have no interaction with the tools that they're regulating, and so it becomes really important for those of us who are technical to also be quite skilled at ethics and at regulation as well, because then, as you were saying, that self-regulation piece can be really not just quick, but also have efficacy and kind of stand the test of people's judgment.
Yeah, and just one final point is the interpretation of regulation. So regulation kind of comes in at the CEO level and board. They say, that's clear to us, we'll hand it down. The management says, it can't mean that, surely. So we're gonna interpret it through our managerial lens now. Then it goes down again, and the workers, if you like, say, they must be having a laugh with this, we can't do this. So they don't do that. And so, one of the things that's the problem with AI is people. Yeah. Yeah, we are fickle, biased, self-interested. That's the issue that we need to somehow rein in as we become more responsible AI builders and users and all that stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And I think HCI plays a really big role in this, in working in workplaces, understanding how people are interacting, not with just the technologies themselves, but the kind of literature around it and how we're supposed to use it. Did anyone else have another question? Yeah.
You've all talked about the reasons. Just so people online. You've all talked about the reasons that Rutger, you talked about like large enterprises and then startups. Some like have this inertia, and then some are like running towards the AI goal. What are the best examples that you've read and seen? You gave the example of holiday, Rutger, but each of you, like, what are the examples that you've seen that businesses are using this really well? Because sometimes in our company, it does feel like, we talked about this in the networking, like ChatGPT is very adject heavy and it's not good for copywriting, and other examples don't like using AI for, but what are the great examples that you could share with us who work in companies in the room?
Do you want to start?
Yeah, maybe I'll just start. Like, there's one example of an incumbent that seems to be doing well. It's Klarna. So they're like the playground customer of OpenAI. They sort of seem to be leading in cost reduction, which you can, of course, debate whether that's an entirely good thing, yes or no, because it has impact on the workforce as well. But they recently reported they're turning off Salesforce, and they're about to turn off Workday, so they're completely revamping their architecture. That was sort of surprising, because I didn't expect companies at that scale to be able to absorb this new technology at such a pace, because typically there's just meeting culture, decision-making processes that slow things down. So that would be a good example, I think.
Lots of examples, actually, both personal and in terms of my work life. A personal one is my partner had a health problem last year, and it was really hard to really figure out what was going on. And actually going through the discussions with ChatGPT gave him more insights and more questions to ask to the doctors to actually get to the bottom of it. So that was quite fascinating. Now, we're both in the technology space, so we're both quite aware of what's possible, what we can ask, what additional questions, and how we need to reflect on these. But that was quite unexpectedly useful very early on. In my day-to-day life, the kind of one key example is really if you write software. People on my team, it's a transition as well. So they think about, okay, I need to build this tool, and it's going to take me a month. And then they come back a few days later, and they're like, okay, it's ready. It just generated most of it for me, and I just needed to figure out a few little details, and it was there. So that's just a step change already, and it's really, really hard to even imagine how much further that's going to go. But then even in kind of day-to-day tasks, like if I'm brainstorming different options, and let's say I've gotten a few opinions from colleagues, and I'm just seeing, okay, are there additional perspectives? I'm starting conversations there, and I think of it more and more as something of, okay, I can just sanity check. What are other ways to think about it? Is there anything that I've missed? So there's a really wide range of areas where I'm already using it, really day to day.
There are just so many examples. The ones that I think about are certainly the health ones. The idea that an oncologist can, beyond what they know, can access kind of every published article that's ever been written about a particular type of cancer and help steer or rule things out and do things like that. We've never had access to that before. I guess another one that springs to mind is there was a lady in London who was killed by a person on a fixed wheel bike, a bike with no brakes. And the lawyers were struggling to find a piece of applicable law to prosecute the irresponsible driver. And AI found a bit of legislation from the 1820s about irresponsible horse and carriage driving in London. And that is what they used to prosecute the case. So the idea that beyond the precedent, the legal precedents that we know about, even the most experienced lawyers in the city, the ones that they retain in their brain, this unlocks a new chasm of legal cases to make better decisions for people like the lady who was, not a better decision for her, but her family, and they get justice, if you like.
That's
things
such
like
a
that.
good example. I did not know
Yeah.
about that. Thank you for that. Do we have time for another question?
We talked a lot about the workforce, and the implications of that. And then Katja, you talked about the skilling and the upskilling, and you talked about development and how that might really change from a technological point of view of being able to speed that up. So I'd love to just hear what should we as quote unquote knowledge workers be preparing for? How do we think about our career and our jobs and how AI is going to really impact that? So just tell me about the skills that I need to know to future-proof myself first. I think a lot of us are here maybe thinking about that, and we want to be educated. And then I think the other question I wanted to ask on top of that was like, I think you mentioned about the Industrial Revolution, and we've been through that. So we've had a lot of like history repeating ourselves. So what did we learn as a society, and how can we apply what's coming at such a pace to ensure that we, as real humans in the loop, do not, I guess, get dictated by AI and lose our originality? There was a lot in there.
Yeah.
So I'll get AI to unpack
All right.
that.
Maybe let's start with the latter part, so the Industrial Revolution. I'm not sure if there are many lessons in there that are suitable to extrapolate to what's coming now. I think that the thing with previous revolutions was it freed up our hands to do work that's higher on the cognitive spectrum. When we create models in AI that's smarter than we are, there's no point in moving up, because you don't have, sounds silly, but any competitive edge as a knowledge worker against something that has like a metered IQ of, I don't know, 210 or something versus the average 100 for people. So I think we'll be making different moves that we didn't make in the past. So not higher up the cognitive spectrum, but more in creative expression or things that maybe aren't priced in economically right now, like parenthood. Right? People talk a lot about population explosion. There are lots of countries facing population implosion. So I think there are many types of labor that we do not consider to be labor today that will become labor in the future. Just like, you know, if you told people 20 years ago you could make a living live streaming games, they would probably think you're mad.
I think you can actually do that already.
Yeah, you can. Yeah. On Twitch, of course, people make huge salaries making a living. But if you told that to people 20 years ago, like this is going to be an occupation, they would probably giggle a little bit. So I think we're not going to make the same moves as we did in the past. It's going to be more creative. What skills do you need? I think being flexible is the most important one. So if everything's going to change, then the best thing you can be or have is to not be rigid and to be flexible and to be curious and to be willing to absorb and genuinely learn new things. And for now, I think the best strategy is just to adopt these tools. Right? There's the silly quote of, AI isn't going to take your job, but somebody using AI will. I think for the coming years that's actually true, but there's a phase after that where these models are so intelligent and also have agency, right? So they take initiative, and at that point I find it difficult to sort of look past it and see what we have to contribute cognitively. So I'm more interested in us making lateral moves rather than vertical ones at that point. So I hope I unpacked all of the components of your question.
Can I react to some of that? What you mentioned reminded me of a talk by Garry Kasparov that I saw years ago. And
About chess.
About chess, exactly. So after being beaten by Deep Blue, I believe, he got actually quite a bit into AI, trying to understand that thing that had dethroned him from being the top chess player in the world. And so he had I really appreciated the depth of his insights there. One optimistic thought that he shared there was that even at that point for chess, even though machines had by far surpassed even the capabilities of Deep Blue at the time, teams of humans and machines playing together were still by far superior to either individual humans or machines. And so I believe that will be true for a very long time. It will be that combination. And you mentioned the quote is silly, but I don't think it's silly. The question is really, how do we leverage this technology as productively as possible so that it empowers us rather than replaces us? Jobs will change. The scale at which we can produce, for example, video games will completely change over the next couple of years. But there will be many different creative jobs or other types of roles where the people who can most effectively leverage this technology will have a real advantage there. And in terms of what is our role in that end game scenario where
Yeah.
machines are super powerful, all-knowing, you still need the moral judgment. You still need decisions based on our human reality, our experience, to figure out what are the right things to do. So I believe that will continue to be our role.
Andrew, do you have anything to
Yeah, the difference between the Industrial Revolution is we created tools and things. The controversial yet phenomenal invention by Oppenheimer of the atomic bomb used all of scientific wisdom at that time, but it was just a thing. Now what we're creating, some people call it our final invention. I think that's a bit doom and gloomy, but we are inventing something that can think for itself and might not necessarily share with us what it's thinking, why it's thinking it, or how it's doing something. That is completely different. We've never seen anything like it before in our lives. In that sense, AI is not just a technology or a tool. It's completely different from that. I think what we've got to watch out for is that we don't outsource too much of our thinking.
Yeah.
I think what we've heard tonight from my colleagues here on the panel is that there are enough thorny issues to point our grey matter to. We mustn't just outsource our thinking to the machines and become inferior to them because we've just relinquished all of our thinking to them and we're just operators. That would cast human beings, I think, into the waste pile. And I don't know what happens after that. Like Rutger, I don't quite know what happens after that.
Yeah, it's interesting because, there's people quoting, why is AI doing the creative work when it's supposed to take away our kind of laborious work to allow us to be more creative? And I really resonate with that about us being able to be more human with technology rather than to be less human in a way. I think, do we have one more, or we're probably quite tight now? If there's a really quick, like a really speedy quick question.
Yeah, sure. My one question would be then, because I've thought about that particular point, is would we then just shift our energy towards, there was a discussion around bank tellers and they're no longer there because, now the ATMs are there, but their roles changed to bank managers. So would we now become more applying new business ideas? Entrepreneurs will be able to do things a lot faster, more competition, speed of progress will be way faster. So, has that been thought through, maybe where we think that will end up?
It's inevitable that there are massive positive gains here as well, and that we'll enjoy new things that we couldn't have imagined even a year ago are going to be possible. So there's no doubt that we'll fold in with the speed of development, and we'll enjoy it, and it will create new types of jobs for sure. It's just making sure that we manage what is being passed to the machines so that we still have a role to play, so that we still have our hand on the tiller of the machine, still have value, still are imbuing these things with the ethics and moral judgment of our organisations. That's where I think our role is going to shift here. The positives of AI are just huge, but a lot of what I talk about are just some of the clarion cries to kind of yes, but, so watch out type of thing.
Thank you. I think we're going to have to end there. I really hope that you've enjoyed today's conversation. I think we've covered quite a lot, and I think we've got a lot of different perspectives, so it's been great, and we could obviously talk about this for hours and hours. Thank you for joining us. And just before we leave, just a kind of PSA. As part of the Fora Presents series, Fora is giving you the opportunity to host your own event with all of the logistics taken care of by their expert team. And today it's been really great. So if you are thinking about holding your own event here, just email forappresents@foraspace.com with your details and event topics, and they'll support you on all of the organisation. So thank you again to all of our guests, all of our panellists, and thank you to you, our guests. Thanks for coming, and that's it for today.
Pleasure.